Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister here at First UU. Today in our country, in churches, in homes, in restaurants, in parks, and everywhere else that people gather, there will be celebrations of the official Mother's Day holiday. And while this message is about something much broader than mothers and the day dedicated to them, I want to acknowledge that sometimes this day, like most special days in our culture, can invoke an array of feelings, emotions, thoughts, and sometimes even past traumatic experiences. In what follows, I will talk some about loss and grief, about reproductive justice, and the reality that many families are dysfunctional in a lot of ways, and there aren't always warm, fuzzy, special day feelings to celebrate. So it's Mother's Day, but you likely already know this. You know this because you've received a card in the mail or a grateful phone call, or maybe even a delivery of flowers if you're a mother. Or you know that you will later today and your heart glows with joy. Or because you haven't, and the grief over your loss is still too fresh or too deep. Or you haven't, and you wonder if something you said or something you did. Or you haven't, and you know exactly where and how the separation started, but you long for a new story that includes reconciliation. Maybe you know it's Mother's Day today because you were so excited about the gift that you were giving this year, either to your own mother or the mother of your children or someone else who parented you, that you just couldn't contain your excitement. Maybe you had to give it early. I was really proud of myself because I drove around with a Mother's Day card in my car for a week before Mother's Day. If you know how I feel about cards, number one, that would be amazing to you. But also, if you know that I am usually 3 steps behind and sort of flying by the seat of my pants, you would appreciate that even more. But I saw my mother yesterday, and I gave her the card. Very proud of her. So I was that person in this scenario. So maybe it's because you're excited about the thing that you were sharing with a person who was important in your life, or maybe it's because you've been navigating the anxiety of choosing yet another gift that may or may not be what they want or need, or be received well, or convey the love that you hope will be conveyed to them, or because you've stood paralyzed in the card aisle, meticulously reading every line of every card, looking for one that rings true, that says what needs saying, but doesn't gloss over the hard realities of relationships. Maybe you know it's Mother's Day because you're a single father, or a father who has helped children to appreciate their mother. Or maybe you know it's Mother's Day because you're a non-binary parent and it brings a whole new level of awkwardness into your conversations on this day. Or because you aren't a parent and never wanted to be. Or you aren't a parent and you long to be. Or you are a parent by adoption or surrogacy or fostering, or one of the many ways that one becomes a parent other than giving birth. And you get the point that this is complicated, right? And so we come into this place today and we celebrate. We celebrate the gift of life and the gift that mothers have been in our lives. We celebrate that Minnie McKinney is in our presence back there and now has an Earthside name. And so Isaac is in this sanctuary with Isaac's parents on their first Mother's Day as parents. And the circles of life go on and touch us in such powerful and beautiful ways, and sometimes such painful and harmful ways. And that's the reality of this life that we live. So on this Mother's Day, I celebrate first and foremost that all of you were born. And that you were nurtured by someone somewhere, at least enough to get to this place. And I am so glad that you're here and that we're here together in this space and on Zoom and on Facebook, however we're connected. And I rejoice with those who are rejoicing this day, and I lament with those who are lamenting, and I weep with you who are weeping, and I hope with all who are hoping, and I pray that whatever it is that each person needs today, that you might receive it in this time together, whether that be honor or respect, comfort, or just feeling seen. May you know that in this sacred space, those things are here for you. And may we hold all of that together in community. So would you just take a breath with me as we hold all that this day brings, and we do it with gratitude and hope for one another. This week, as I reflected on Mother's Day and how it connects to our principles, I found myself reading the original Mother's Day Proclamation, written in 1870 by Unitarian Julia Ward Howe, which, not surprisingly, is found in our hymnals as a responsive reading, number 573. And if there's a hymnal near you, I would invite you to open it. There's not one everywhere, so my apologies if you're not one of those people. But if you are, you get the blessing of being one of the voices today in this service. And so it's found at number 573. And I will read the parts in regular print, and I will invite you to respond with the parts in italics. Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us, reeking with carnage, for the caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, and each bearing after her own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. And what is not included in the piece shared in our hymnal is the call to action. In the name of womanhood and humanity, I earnestly ask that a general Congress of women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace. May it be so. What is it they say about a woman scorned? There's something really powerful about a woman, a mother even, who feels the need to speak up for the safety of their children, for the safety of all the people in this world, and the ways in which they have learned to nurture and to teach and to provide for these humans who are growing up, and then to watch and hope and pray that they become the people, not just that we poured into them to be, because we can't even know what those small humans are intended to be. We can only give them what is ours to give and help them grow into what is theirs to step into. But the power of that is so important. And so on this Mother's Day, I celebrate that we don't think of gender in the way that we used to. That we understand that people parent children in the ways that we used to assume was the job and role of the cisgender female mother. And that has opened up this whole world of nurture to the kids who are growing up today, to the people who are in their young adulthood, and it's really, really incredible and also really, really hard to step into and to understand as people who grew up with very set understandings and definitions of what it means to be a mother. And so today I want to invite you to think of mothering in a different way, mothering in the way that is ours as a community to do so. Parenting, if you will, nurturing. This month we're talking about nurturing beauty, and we think about the ways that we are called as a community of faith, as a community of purpose, as a community of principles to come together and to nurture what is growing up in this world around us so that it might be repaired, so that it might be made whole. And that is our investment in it. When I hear what Julia Ward Howe penned, wrote in 1870, and I hear it through my ears 150 years later, through my own lived experience, through the world that I have seen, through my own filter, if you will, I hear this. We humans are deeply connected, and our connectedness is too sacred to be destroyed by conflict and war. There must be another way, one that centers the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the first UU principle. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, the second UU principle. The goal of world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all, the sixth UU principle. And respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we all are part, the seventh UU principle. The earth is crying out in devastation, and the loss of life is calamitous, both in our times and places of conflict and war, and in all the ways that people are dying here right around us. Out of desperation, when they can't get through the struggles that they need to get through to find wholeness in their mental health. People who are dying around us because of addiction to drugs that have been put out in the streets in droves in order that some pharmaceutical company might make a profit. The people are dying around us because they don't have the health care that they need to access in an equitable manner for things that they should be able to manage, health conditions that are livable, right? People are dying around us, and the loss of life is calamitous. It is time to act now, and all people of peace and goodwill must lend their voice to the cause. Silence is violence. That's what I hear when I hear the words of Julia Ward Howe, penned 150 years ago, that we are called to this place, we are called to this moment to bring all of ourselves, all of our spiritual resources, all of our intellectual resources, all of our physical resources, all of our financial resources, so that we can nurture this world into being in a way that gives life. When Howe penned this message, apparently influenced by another peace activist, Anne Reeves Jarvis, she imagined that an appeal to the shared experience of motherhood and the shared values that she believed many women must hold could and would make a difference if given the chance. Jarvis seemed to think the same thing. And when her daughter Anna Jarvis was finally successful in getting Mother's Day recognized as a holiday in 1914, it wasn't long before she was disenchanted with what it had become and wished it hadn't happened at all. One article says that by 1920, she had become disgusted with how the holiday had become commercialized. She outwardly denounced the transformation and urged people to stop buying Mother's Day flowers, cards, and candies. She eventually resorted to an open campaign against Mother's Day, the profiteers who had taken it over and launched lawsuits against groups that had used the name Mother's Day, eventually spending most of her personal wealth in legal fees, so that by the time of her death in 1948, Jarvis had disowned the holiday altogether and actively lobbied the government to see it removed from the American calendar. And yet here we are on Mother's Day, which is a testament to both the power of organizing in communities to bring about change and the power of a community to run away with a thing and completely lose sight of its original meaning. Which brings me to the title of my message today, Mothered in Community, with the M in parentheses. So as to say, we are mothered in community and we are othered in community. If that language isn't familiar to you, the process of othering is the process of sort of dividing us and them and defining the characteristics that are different about a person or a group of people and using that to sort of send them to the margins, othering. And so, earlier this week, I was reading a book by Dr. Pragya Agarwal called Mothered, with the M in parentheses, in Community. It's called Motherhood on the Choices of Being a Woman. Dr. Agarwal is a behavioral and data scientist and an author of several books, including Sway, Unraveling Unconscious Bias, and Wish We Knew What to Say, Talking to Children About Race. Her newest book on motherhood is part memoir and part manifesto, in her words, and takes on difficult topics related to the ways that women are put into boxes and often live in the suffocating smallness of choices limited by the powerful people, historically cisgender men, in their personal lives and in the society. She believes that sharing our stories with one another is key to claiming power and autonomy over our own bodies and experiences. In the introduction, Agarwal writes, "Stories matter. Individual stories project into universal experiences, and women's stories have long been hidden, ignored, sidelined. Stories about women's bodies are usually not heard unless and until they are told from a man's perspective." And this is something we've seen played out on every media platform in these last few days. As the news was leaked about the upcoming Supreme Court decision that could reverse the Roe versus Wade decision that guaranteed women the right to make choices about their own reproductive health care without excessive government restriction. Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray, president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, has this to say about the news. "We are heartbroken and outraged that it appears the Supreme Court is poised to overturn nearly 5 decades of precedent to take rights away from pregnant people. And we greatly fear that this decision will justify efforts to further limit the rights of women and other vulnerable populations in this country. Furthermore, we know the most damaging impacts of overturning Roe will be felt by people of color, young people, poor and working class people, and those living in rural areas, all who even today do not have ready access to comprehensive and equitable reproductive care, including access to abortion. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that all bodies are sacred. Every person has the right to determine if, when, and how they choose to have children. As people of faith, this commitment is part of our sincerest religious values. Unitarian Universalism proclaims that all individuals and communities have the right to self-determination, safety, and the resources that are necessary for health and sustainability. As a faith tradition, we are committed to reproductive justice, which espouses the human right to have children, not have children, to parent the children one has in a healthy environment, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and to express one's sexuality freely. I didn't grow up in UU spaces. In fact, I never met a UU person until I was in seminary. Oh my goodness, how I wish I had grown up in a space that espoused those values, that said that all bodies were sacred and that I and all the people around me had autonomy over that body, and that I could make the choices that were right for me without other people deciding what those choices should have been or judging based on the choices that were made. What a beautiful way to grow up in a community. And the thing that has struck me as one of the greatest strengths of this community is the way that you have been community together, the way that you have raised your children together. Many of them adults who have moved off to other places and we don't get to see them in this space, but you did that in community. When I hear Susan Frederick Gray talk about parenting or not parenting in healthy environments, I think of spaces like this, where we're gathered by a set of values and a desire for spiritual growth and practice that is not burdened with dogma and doctrine, but is open to experimentation. Spaces where an individual's search for truth and meaning is deepened, challenged, and empowered by diverse viewpoints, freely shared in respectful exchanges that uphold human dignity above all. Which brings me back to Dr. Agarwal and her writing in Motherhood. Early in the book, she says, "All that matters as a writer is that I hold your trust in my hands, as valuable to me as to you, and you hold my stories in your heart, as resonant to you as to me." Agarwal knows that when we make ourselves vulnerable and share our stories and our most deeply held truths with one another, that we share our lives. And when we share our lives, we share a hope for a future together. When we share our lives, the needs and desires of the whole become what we hold at our center, and we find ways to tend to the individual while also strengthening the community. So I want to leave you this morning with some questions to ponder over this day, over the next week, or however long they resonate with you. First, how and where were you mothered in community? If you are a parent, how and where were your children mothered in community? I invite you to remember times and places where there was nurture at work in something broader than the nuclear family, to offer gratitude for that, and to imagine how you are able to give that gift to others. And second, how and where were you othered in community? Or how and where have the children you've loved been othered in community, been made to think that they don't have a voice, been shunned because of their difference, or been pushed into roles that weren't meant for them? Have there been limiting stereotypes applied, choice taken away or never given to begin with, autonomy challenged and overtaken by authoritarian or even majority-driven values and viewpoints that conflict with your own? When we think about the ways that we have been mothered and othered in community, the ways that the children around us have had those experiences, and the ways as people who form intentional community that we have fed into that experience for other people, we start to recognize the deep, deep importance of community in raising next generations. The communities that raise us and shape us are powerful forces in our lives and the lives of the generations that come after us. And since we never stop being shaped by those around us, I hope, the communities that we enter and build throughout our lifetimes can be such incredible gifts to us and to those who show up just at the time in their life where they most need to be wrapped in the love and support of a community. So today, as we observe Mother's Day and celebrate all of those who have nurtured us in our lives, may we consider how we as a community will love even more fully, support even more broadly, and advocate even more boldly for those who step into our circle, so that we might together make a world that is more kind, more just, and more welcoming. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.